maybe this is the game that Fields can finally make a few more plays through the air in the early stages of this game. I see you laughing. I know it's a tough bet to make.
Let's get into your start sits, and I'm looking at your list here, and I'm none too pleased with your first must start from a fan standpoint, so you're going to have to sell this on me a little bit. So tell me, why is Justin Fields a must start this week?
I know Justin Fields has not been great as a passer so far this year. I know if you're box score scouting, you might look at it and say, oh, he's been good. But in reality, he's throwing a lot of dump offs, a lot of garbage time, yards, and touchdowns. And, he hasn't thrown an interception, but he just hasn't made explosive plays through the air. So I get why people might not want to trust him. However, this matchup against the Cowboys looks really appetizing on paper. The Cowboys have allowed a league high 1,237 passing yards and 12 total touchdowns to quarterbacks this year. So maybe this is the game that Fields can finally make a few more plays through the air in the early stages of this game. I see you laughing. I know it's a tough bet to make, but even if he doesn't, we saw the rushing upside that he had against the Dolphins with that 43-yard touchdown scramble. That is going to raise his floor, make him a super high-end streamer. And hey, with this passing ceiling, he could potentially crack the top 5-6 quarterbacks this week. Now, if he doesn't pass well, he's going to be probably on the outside edge of that, but I still think he's got enough upside here.
Jacob, I laugh because for how long have we been hearing with Justin Fields? Maybe this is the game, right? Like maybe this is
right.
Like we've been hearing that for years. And I think, I don't want to take it away from our fantasy conversation, but this is the dichotomy between fantasy and like real life football, right? Because like fantasy, you can afford this guy to go 16 of 22 or whatever with the garbage time yards to pad the stats, right? But when you're watching it as a fan and you see how ineffective it is, it's funny to me. That's all. It's funny, and I'm pulling my hair out. So anyway, decent sell, Jacob. So I'll accept that. But moving on, Woody Marks and Texans, a running back. Why is he a must start this week?
Yeah, so we kind of saw him take over the full-time rushing workload from Nick Chubb. It's not, there's still going to be a split there, but Marks outtouched Chubb 21-15 last week, and he racked up 119 total yards and 2 touchdowns for a Texans offense that really had not been doing much at all in the first few weeks of the season. Now, I know he was playing against the Titans. The Titans are not only a bad team, but they're very bad against running backs. So maybe we shouldn't expect Marks to kind of put out those results every single week. But he's playing a Ravens team that is super banged up right now. Nnamdi Madubuike is out for the season. Roquan Smith, their star linebacker, may not play. So we're looking at this Ravens defense and saying, man, they're not going to be very good. And if the Texans continue to lean on their running game to carry them, that's going to open the door for Marks to get maybe 15 to 20 touches again, make him a quality flex with, high-end RB2 ceiling. So I love him in this matchup. As long as the Ravens are this injured, you're going to want to start pretty much everyone against them.
All right, Jacob. This is another must start you have here. It feels risky. It's a little bit sexy, though. I have to respect it. Rumors of this player's demise have been greatly exaggerated, and that is one, Darren Waller, former rapper, recently retired, recently unretired, now catching touchdowns for the Miami Dolphins. Why is he a must start this week?
Yeah, so if you told me even a week ago that I'd be recommending Darren Waller as a start as of week 5, I'd be like, there's no way that that's going to happen. But you look at what the Dolphins have been able to do through the air this year, and Tua Tagovailoa has been pretty accurate the last couple of weeks, and now he's going to be without Tyreek Hill, his top receiver. Hill had that gruesome knee dislocation on Monday Night Football. He's going to miss the rest of the year. So that's going to open up some targets in this offense. And I know a lot of them will probably go to Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane, but Darren Waller is going to be in the mix here, particularly in the red zone. In his debut, he played only 16 snaps, but he caught 2 touchdowns. So Tua is going to look his way a lot, and Tua loved throwing to Jonnu Smith last year. Smith was second on the team in targets with 111. That was well ahead of Jalen Waddle and only behind Tyreek Hill. So if Darren Waller can look as good as he did Monday night, moving forward, I think he's going to become one of Tua's top weapons. That'll make him a week in, week out tight end, top 10 tight end in fantasy. So I like backing him here. And the Panthers, they're not very good against tight ends. So this is a good matchup for him.
Yeah, I was going to say, how much do you take into account the fact that they played against a Jets defense that really hasn't been great against the pass this year in the decision this week?
That definitely, makes this a little bit of a riskier play because you're talking about a one game sample size against the defense that hasn't lived up to expectations. But because the Panthers also, they've had trouble against tight ends for a long time, the Panthers, and because the targets vacated by Hill leaving the offense are going to, funnel down, I'm a little bit more confident in Waller this week. And again, he had that production playing just 16 snaps. They're going to ramp him up. He's going to play more moving forward. And as that happens, I expect his chemistry with Tagovailoa to improve. So, tight end is usually a fantasy wasteland. So I'm willing to just kind of take a dart throw on a guy like Waller and say he's done it before. Maybe he can do it again. He's definitely well rested at this point after missing all of last season while retired.
All right, Jacob. So we gave the viewers out there, fantasy managers, some of your must start players of the week. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, we got to give them some must sits. So let's head over to the NFC North, and Jordan Mason's in must sit this week. Why is that?
Yeah, it sounds wrong, I know, because he's going to get a lot of the rushing workload there with Aaron Jones still out. But the Browns have just been so good against running backs this year. They're allowing just 2.9 yards per carry, and I think the second fewest total rushing yards to running backs. So it's already a tough matchup for Mason. And then you add in that his center, Ryan Kelly, suffered his second concussion of the season last week. He probably won't play this week. Right tackle Brian O'Neill also probably won't play this week because of a knee injury. So all of a sudden, things are getting pretty thin up front for that Vikings blocking unit. So not only is his blocking going to be weaker, but he has a bad matchup against a good-looking Cleveland Browns front. So I would just try to steer clear of him if you can. I get that there are bye weeks going on, so you might not have another option, but just don't expect him to have a big game. If anything, he might get like 20 carries, but only 50 to 60 yards.
All right, Jacob, let's head over to Philadelphia, and there's been a certain wide receiver who's been making some headlines for his performance this year, but we're not going to talk about AJ Brown. We're going to talk about Devontae Smith as a must sit this week. So why Devontae for as a must sit, and why not AJ Brown?
Yeah, I think you can make the case, honestly, for both of them as must sits because they're playing against the Broncos, who have been very good against receivers this year. But it's kind of flown under the radar with all the AJ Brown drama that Smith also hasn't been, doing a whole lot. And that's because the Eagles are averaging a league low 25.3 passing attempts per game. That's just how their offense is built. They love to run the ball with Saquon Barkley. They love to run the tush push in short yardage situations. So this isn't really going to change. They're going to be a passing volume team. So that's going to limit the upside of guys like Brown and Smith. Now, I think because Brown has been making waves kind of with his cryptic social media posts this week, I think there might be a more concerted effort to get him the ball against Denver. That could limit Smith's ceiling. And already his ceiling was not quite as high as it has usually been because he's averaging a career low 9.3 yards per reception so far. So, tough matchup, not a lot of targets, not a lot of explosive plays for Smith. So I would sit him this week, especially since we don't know who Patrick Surtain is going to match up against. One would think it might be AJ Brown, but hey, maybe the Broncos look at this and say, hey, we can take away Devontae Smith and make them try to force feed Brown, who hasn't been very good this year either.
I want to hit on AJ Brown real quick, Jacob. And what's his fantasy outlook the rest of the season? I mean, it looked like he was coming alive the week before last, and then again another kind of no show this past weekend. So what do you make of AJ Brown moving forward?
Yeah, he's having one of the weirder seasons out there, right? Because last week, I think he had what, two catches for 7 yards, but it wasn't for a lack of opportunity. He got 9 targets. He just didn't catch many of them. So, is there a disconnect between him and Hurts, or is this an organizational philosophy thing where they want to emphasize the run and Brown just isn't getting enough targets to consistently make plays? It's hard to know exactly what's going on. I would still try to buy low on him if you can. He's simply too talented to be held in check like this for most of the season. And I think that the Eagles are going to find a way to get him sort of re-involved and invigorate their passing game a little bit. But, through a month, this has certainly not been what the people who drafted AJ Brown were expecting from him.
All right, Jacob. So we move on to your last must sit this week, and shout out colleague, coworker Tom Vieira, Tommy V TV. Fantasy wasteland tight ends usually are, right? Hunter Henry for the Patriots. Why is he a must sit?
So I get that it's hard to recommend sitting a tight end who's been as solid and consistent as Henry, But the Buffalo Bills, his opponent, have been the best team in the league against tight ends this year. Through 4 weeks, they've only allowed 9 catches to the position for 67 yards and a touchdown. And this was despite them playing the Ravens in week 1. And the Ravens have Mark Andrews, and they shut down Mark Andrews. I know Andrews tends to start the season slowly, but still, he's a good tight end, good pass catching tight end. So I just don't have much faith that Henry's going to be able to get things going against a good defense like this. Another example of this last week, Juwan Johnson has been one of the better targets for the Saints. Played the Bills last week. He only had a couple catches. So I think this ends up being more of a Drake May throws to Stefon Diggs type of game, or maybe the Patriots find some semblance of a running game with the committee they have if they could stop fumbling the ball with Ramondre Stevenson.
I wasn't going to let you go without talking a little bit more about the Patriots, Jacob. And this week, somebody asked Stefon Diggs, hey, what's your confidence in the Patriots offense right now? What's your belief? And he said, 5 out of 10. Now, I want to take that to a fantasy perspective. And what's your confidence in Stefon Diggs right now? It looks like he's kind of found the fountain of youth.
Yeah, I would have confidence in him. I'd probably put it at a 7 out of 10. The seven kind of acknowledging, hey, he's the top target in that offense if healthy, without a doubt. I mean, there's no other receiver that can rival what he can do. So as long as he can develop chemistry with Drake May, which he's starting to show, he should be a good fantasy asset, maybe wide receiver 3 on a weekly basis on a good team. And, he has wide receiver 2 upside because of the target floor he has. The going with a 7 instead of, say, a 10 is just an acknowledgement of he's on the older side. The Patriots have a younger quarterback. There could be some inconsistent moments for this team. There might be some opportunities for the Patriots to have a more run heavy game plan too, which would take, Diggs' ceiling down a little bit. But I generally think week in, week out with this guy now, you can trust him in your lineups. He's going to be able to get a lot of targets each week and just be the clear cut number 1 wide receiver for the team all year. Unless they make a trade, there's no other receiver that can rival him for that position.